It's beautiful that we come together. It's such a nice community. And it's great that we get to listen to so much awesome research. And with that, let's go to the next slide. So, Neuromatch very much is about a mission. What do we mean with the mission? The first one, and that's pretty obvious, is that money should never exclude people from participating in conferences. No, like in the past, in legacy conferences, there can be conferences that cost you thousands of dollars. They will almost always cost you hundreds of dollars. Neuromatch believes that this should never be the case, that people get excluded for that reason. And that's why you will have seen there's just a button which says waive the fee, and it works. The second reason is all identities should be welcome. Neuroscientists come in all kinds, in all kinds of flavors, in all kinds of identities. And we are so amazing as a community because we all come together. So all identities should be welcome. We should not limit talks to the famous people. So, and that is very important for us, that basically in a lot of settings, it's very easy to ask the famous people to give talks, but that leads to a situation where a relatively small number of ideas just get a lot of exposure, and that's a problem. The next one is, we don't think as conference organizers, we should have editorial control. Instead, what Neuromatch does is it says, okay, all your submissions, they will all be presented. They will all get the same amount of time. And us as organizers shouldn't be able to say who we want to talk, because how could we properly represent what the important topics are? So instead, we replace the editorial control problem with basically a scheduling problem. People tell us which talks they should give, and they also tell us which talks they would see, and they tell us when they have time. And then we solve these big algorithmic problems of which talk should be seen at which point of time. So in a way, that means that us as organizers don't choose what you see. It means that you choose what you see. The next point is that we should strive to be better together. There's always aspects about, like any community, that are not great for the people who participate, that make people feel not so great about what's going on. And we want to strive. We will not be perfect. No one will be perfect. No conference will be perfect. But we strive to make the experience of participating in a conference better every time we run Neuromatch. And the last thing is, we believe in bringing scientists together. And that's what Neuromatch was about right from the beginning, that we want to see which people we can bring together so that they meaningfully can make connections and jointly make the field better. And this being driven by a mission is in lots of ways shared between Neuromatch Conference and our sister organization, Neuromatch Academy, that a lot of you will have heard about. So this is the mission of Neuromatch Conference. So let's talk a little bit about the history of Neuromatch, because we believe that that's important. So how did it all start? Tetipat, in collaboration with me and the lab, has for a long time been interested in how we could bring people together that have similar interests. And we started running these sessions for the CCN conference, where we at a legacy conference, in a conference in an offline space, would introduce people to one another. And we do that all at the same time. And it felt really good. So people would be matched in pairs, and then they were told, you have 10 minutes to talk with one another. And then the next pair comes, and then the next pair. And we basically filled a room with 200 people that were all matching with one another. Now, that worked really well. The main complaint that we get is that it was too loud, because you can imagine if 200 people in one room start talking at the same point of time, it's absolutely crazy. It's incredibly loud. So one of the people there was Dan Goodman. And Dan then pushed that idea, let's bring this mind matching from that conference space in the offline world into the online world and make it ideally be more meaningful. And the idea back then was, hey, there's so much carbon being burned, but we have, the reasons are much deeper. And that's what you saw in the mission statement. It's not just to bring down carbon. It is also, of course, to deal with the pandemic, but it's also about inclusion. And that wasn't even that clear from us when we got started. But suddenly, so here was the email that we get from Dan Goodman, and where he said, like, hey, we should like bring something like this to the online world. And he sent me the email at 9:46, and you see, like 1 minute later, I said, yeah, let's do it. And I kind of heard from Titipat that that was an idea we should do. And another 8 minutes later, Titipat already sent technical details of how we could do all of this. So there you see like this, and this is very typical for Neuromatch as an organization. We want to make science better, and we are willing to do this kind of as fast as possible. And we are not taking no. We basically say like, yeah, let's do it better. And lots of people over Neuromatch made proposals on how to do it better. And we all just try to enable that efficiently. So then in March 30th, we ran Neuromatch Conference 1. So we were originally just thinking of matching, but now that we had all those things and COVID was happening, we were like, okay, cool. Let's make this actually be a real conference. And it was very homegrown. So we were running things with like huge Google Sheets where hosts would add themselves and where speakers would add themselves. And we hosted a lot of the session ourselves. And because we didn't have a budget at all, we were running kind of a lot of things out of people's private Zooms that we got just by virtue of them being like academics. And we ran a lot of things on Crowdcast, and that really, really made things feel nice. And we loved Crowdcast back then. And it felt very good from a community perspective. But what Neuromatch 1 taught us is that you can actually run a lot of these things by just using technology and real volunteers, and kind of, you didn't need the $100,000 contracts with private companies to run good online conferences. So then, because it worked well and because it was so much fun, just 2 months later, we organized the second Neuromatch conference. We felt there were a lot of innovations that were possible that we hadn't done. And so it felt like we were missing things. So our team grew a little bit. We had like a lot of awesome people join us. And but we were still running a similar tech stack. So speakers shared Google Sheets to sign up, and we ran a lot of sessions, but we needed some help. And in Neuromatch Conference 2, we even managed to run all the parallel sessions, short talks on Crowdcast, and also therefore we didn't need Zoom anymore, and that made everything a lot better. And it will be fun for you to see how we are back to Zoom, namely Crowdcast ended up having a service quality that was degrading over time. We also did a lot of community engagement. For example, we ran an obituary session, we ran debates, and we had a great partnership with IEEE. So let's go to the next slide. So that brings us to the Neuromatch Academy. So for a long time, we had been running this summer school with Gunnar Blom, and we had Paul Schrader involved, and we had Megan Peters involved in it, and Neuromatch, and it was called Cosmo. And we had canceled that because it was clear we couldn't run it in an online world. Now, the big problem was that, or like what we realized after Neuromatch Conference 2 is, oh my God, we can actually run meetings that scale. And that in a way convinced us that we could bring back a summer school. So what we did is we ran a 3-week summer school with about 200 volunteers, 2,000 interactive students, 5,000 observer students, 200 TAs. And during the course of Neuromatch Academy, we had a lot of professionalization. Basically, we had people like Patrick Minot join us, who really helped us bring our tech stack together and become much, much more scalable. And that's how we got that crazy idea that we could run Neuromatch Conference 3. And Chris will continue the presentation now.
Good morning. My name is Chris Roselle, and it is just a pleasure to be here with you this morning. As Conrad said, in the heels of Neuromatch Academy, and when the summer months were waning and the pandemic was still around, everyone was wondering if the traditional legacy conferences in the fall were going to be able to happen or not. And in August, we all got the message that the large meeting, Society for Neuroscience meeting, was going to be canceled. And you can see here, we screenshotted the genesis of Neuromatch 3, and I think this perfectly sums up the kind of temperament that the Neuromatch team has. You know, there's a message when we saw that SFN was canceled to say, well, that felt doable for Neuromatch 2. We've professionalized a lot of the technology stack with Neuromatch Academy. Why don't we just run another conference and try to expand to all of neuroscience instead of just our homes of computational neuroscience? And you can see Dan's reply there, oh God, it's happening again, right? And it's one of the things that I think characterizes the Neuromatch team is a spirit of, yeah, we can try and do this. We can try and do something, and it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be better than what we have. And we're going to be able to identify ways that we can innovate from there to continue making things better. One of the key things that we knew we had going for us was a large pool of interested and invested volunteers that had built up over the first two conferences and over the Neuromatch Academy. And really, it's crucial that that these volunteers are there. There's just so much work to be done. It made it feel doable to do a larger scale meeting. So, as Conrad said, we grew the team. So the full organizing team for NMC3 is shown here: Brad Weibel, Tim Vogels, Megan Peters, Dan Goodman, Patrick Minolt, Yuda Perozzi, myself, Conrad, and Tipat Akelvisit, and many, many other volunteers that are helping to make things run behind the scenes. And we're so grateful for them. What we found out is we put the call out and people were excited to still be able to engage in community, still excited to be able to share their science with the world. And so in just a matter of a couple of very short and hectic months here, we have a program that you're going to see this week that I think is just incredible. We have about 850 contributed talks, about 80 keynote and special events talks. We have thousands of people already registered to participate. We've opened it up to everyone in neuro. Everyone and their mothers are invited with costs very low to free. We wanted the finances not to be an impediment to anyone. So we wanted it to be easy to say, I don't have a source to pay. We want everyone to be able to come in. So you'll see when you look at the agenda, this program is running almost 24 hours a day, all week long for people all over the world. So we're excited to be able to share with you what the science that people have contributed and the scientists are excited to share. So I think Dan has put together some statistics about the submissions and the participants in Neuromatch. And is going to tell us a little bit about who Neuromatch 3 is, who's listening and who's participating this week.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Dan Goodman. I'm at Imperial College in London, and I'm really excited to be here for Neuromatch 3. It's been a crazy few weeks, a couple of months organizing this. Chris said, and Conrad said earlier that one of the ideas for us with this conference was to try to let go of some of our editorial biases, and hopefully that would be reflected in the statistics. And so we didn't have a lot of time to analyze our statistics in detail, but we've just have a little look here at some of the gender stats for our participants and our speakers. And you can see, I think, that we're actually doing not too bad. So we can see here that if we look at all of our participants, we have 48% female, 51% male, and 1% which are various categories, non-binary, transgender, and various other categories. What you can see is that it's not perfect. you can see that there's a leaky pipeline going on here. If you look at undergrads, we are 50%, 56% female, and that drops down by the time you get to professor to 34% female. So there is a leaky pipeline going on, although some of that is, I guess, to do with the ratio that actually exists in the field. And we have a slide on that in a couple of slides. But first of all, we also have the same stats for our speakers. So you can see here that it's more or less matching the participants. So we haven't introduced biases at the level of the speakers. Okay, and so to try and get a feel for whether or not we were doing well or badly, the data we found was from BiasWatch Neuro. And you can see that the black dashed lines on these plots here show their estimate for the field as a whole. So you can see that overall, actually, we're doing slightly better in terms of female representation, although we're doing slightly worse at the faculty level and at the trainee, that is postdoc and grad level. So I think part of the fact that we're doing better overall there is that we have a lot of undergrads who I think probably BiasWatch Neuro not counting in their data. I'm not 100% sure. But in any case, we're matching that fairly well. So I mean, I think we're not doing perfectly, but we're doing okay, I think. And I think that this, to some extent, validates the approach of letting go of that editorial control, and that if you do that, you can start to address some of those biases. Okay. We also had a quick breakdown of where people are coming from. And as you can see, it's majority graduate students, quite a lot of postdocs, and then various other categories like professors, undergrads, research assistants, and a little bit from industry. And in fact, I'm really happy to see that there's quite a lot of undergraduate representation. And I think that is, again, partly because of our model of making this either very cheap or almost free, in fact, lets those people come and participate in this. So I think that's great. Okay, so that's all for the stats for the moment. I think, is it Jota is going to talk about the program committee? Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. And as you already heard, we have managed to put together an amazing program with talks from wide range backgrounds. And we have to thank our program committee for that. We've organized this in 5 themes, 6 themes actually. The first theme is the development, neurodegenerative disorders and injury, let's say, theme. And there we recruited people from both Europe, the US, Switzerland, Austria, Julie Lopez Bedito from Alicante, Spain, Rosa Cossard from France, Denis Javadon from Switzerland, and Gaia Novarino from Austria. Thank you all very much for putting together this theme. In theme B, neural excitability, synapses and glia, we had Attila Lozonsky from Columbia University, Judith Makara from Hungary, Thora Karadotir from Cambridge, Robert Fremke from NYU. Robert, in fact, we're particularly thankful to you for putting this theme together with such a lot of effort and passion. In theme C, sensory and motor systems and physiology and behavior, Peter Strick, thank you, Peter. James Finley from Southern California, the University of Southern California, my home university. Lena Ting from Emory, Quilin Wei from Peking University, and Jackie Chiller from Israel. Thank you everyone for putting together theme C. And we have some amazing talks in all of those that we hope you will attend. For theme D, which focuses on cognition, motivation, and emotion, we have special thanks to Manuel Mameli from the University of Lausanne for putting an amazing amount of work in recruiting the best for this theme, together with Yves De Rosa from Cornell University, Andre Fenton from NYU, and Ute Hagel from the University of Aachen. Theme E, I think the one mostly loved by Chris here, focuses on computation and techniques. Again, we have an amazing group of people there putting together the talks. Christian Lister from Cornell University, Polina Anikiva from MIT, Doug Weber from Carnegie Mellon University, and finally a special theme, F, that focuses on history, education, and society, where Nancy Kanwisker and Adrian Fairhall together put an amazing program. So thank you. Special thanks to all.
Jota, I'm going to interrupt just for a second. I know that there's an omission in theme F, and I don't want to leave that out. Karen Rommelfanger from Emory University was also part of the theme F program committee, and we're very, very grateful to her. She did a lot of work pulling in some great speakers there. So just a last minute addition that got missed in a copy paste there. Karen Rommelfanger from Emory University.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. So special thanks to everyone on our program committee for helping us put together this amazing program. And we just have a few highlights. The next slide. We have so many keynotes, 80 keynotes or 90, I can't remember. We just have a few highlighted examples here, randomly selected, so no special attention to the people here, but I just wanted to mention Natalia DeMarco, for example, from Cornell. She will talk to us about the network activity in the development of inhibitory circuits. Bart Stuber, which you probably all know, he's a specialist on Alzheimer's. He will speak on Thursday about the cellular changes occurring in early Alzheimer's disease. In theme B, we have Daniel Colon Ramos speaking on Monday today, actually. Actuating a memory, how C. elegans remembers a learned behavioral preference. Erin Schumann will speak on Friday about social isolation and mechanicization in zebrafish. In theme C, tomorrow, we have Trisha Kesar speaking about neural and biochemical correlates of post-hoc gait retaining. And C. Nescola speaking on Wednesday about thalamocortical loops controlling cortical dynamics in a model of flexible motor sequencing. And this is just, as I said, a selected list of people of our keynotes, and we have many more. Similarly, for the next themes, D, E, and F, Dayu Lin from NYU will speak on Friday about the neural circuit of aggression, innate yet flexible. That will be interesting. Will Norton will speak on Friday about the genetic basis of mirror-induced aggression in zebrafish. And in theme E, which is, I think, the one that got most of the attention because of its relation to computational techniques, which is how Neuromatch started, we're featuring Manish Sahani, who will speak about chasing the light, mechanistically informed, and Genevira Allen, I hope I'm pronouncing all this correctly, graph quilting, graph structure learning from non-simultaneous neural recordings. Some of these talks are organized into special sessions and workshops, and there are many people involved. I just listed a few of the keynotes here. In theme F, Tim Brown will talk to us about today about the social impact of brain-machine interfaces, structural inequality in BMI study and practice. That should also be very interesting. I would like to listen to that. And we have an amazing panel in theme F, just one of the many that we have actually. The Psychocommunication panel, which will be on Wednesday, and it features a lot of people: Ali Caldwell from the University of Chicago Medicine, Grace Lindsay from UCL, Mark Humphreys from University of Nottingham, Tim Requash from NYU, and Thien Griffith from UC Davis. And Chris is the main organizer for this, if you want to add something about the panel.
No, thank you, Yoda. In addition to the keynotes and the contributed talks, we took this opportunity to reflect our values in trying to be inclusive and include the whole community, to have a number of special events that focus on professional development for trainees, as well as different inclusion themes that, that groups in neuroscience have been doing a lot of great work in, and we wanted to try and highlight. So I wanted to highlight a few of those here. So on the professional development side, today at 1 o'clock Eastern time, there's going to be a panel on future opportunities in neuroscience and neurotechnology with the Brain Initiative Alliance leadership. So these will be the leaders of the Brain Initiative funding in the US from NIH, NSF, IARPA, Kavli Foundation, and the Simons Foundation. So they'll be talking to us about what the funding agencies believe are the opportunities in the next few years, what different priorities they have, and give us a sense of where they think the opportunities in the field are heading. On Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, we'll have part of our collaboration with the organization Black in Neuro, where they'll be running a panel and a journal club on neuroracism. We'll see more from that collaboration later in the week. And I should have mentioned also, sorry to back up for a second, the Brain Initiative Alliance, we're also collaborating with in a series of keynote events in theme E, where they're highlighting some of the technologists who have been producing new technologies out of the Brain Initiative. So moving ahead, on Wednesday at noon Eastern time, there'll be a session from Queer and Trans in Neuro, where they'll be running a story session and Q&A, talking about their experiences in the LGBTQ community in neuroscience. On Wednesday, another professional development session. I'll be hosting a discussion with Tom Foreman, who is a broadcast journalist and anchor on CNN, about effective science communication. And this will be followed up with the panel that Iota just mentioned at 3 o'clock right after that, of neuroscientists who are working in science communication. On Wednesday at 5 p.m., we have a group of first-generation scholars who's going to do a great session on stories of science from first-generation scholars. So first-generation college students, first-generation immigrants to the US, people who are in new environments and trying to make their way in systems that are not necessarily structured for them. We'll be hearing stories and Q&A panels from them. On Thursday, we're back to our collaboration with Black in Neuro, where they'll be running a series of mentorship workshops, one for trainees and one for faculty on effective mentoring relationships. And then finally on Friday at noon, we'll be running a session called Better Together, Let's Improve the Culture in Neuroscience. It'll be an opportunity for people to come together and talk about the experiences that they've had in neuroscience, both positive and negative. So we can celebrate the things that are going well, but also take a look at the things in our field as a whole that could be improved. Things that we can try as a community to try and push for the field of neuroscience, but also things that we can start with Neuromatch conferences and Neuromatch Academy in saying, what can we make better kind of right here in our own house first as a way to try and make the community better. So this is an overview of some of the program highlights that we're excited about. I wanted to take a minute and just tell you a little bit about the technology stack that we've been developing to make this happen in a way that we think enables some of our values and some of our mission statement to be expressed in a conference format. So Dan, can you tell us about that?
Yeah, sure. So as Conrad started with in the intro, the original idea for Neuromatch came out of Conrad and Titipat's matching at the CCN conference. And the way I saw that is that it somehow allows you to do something unbiased, as I was saying before, that it tells you who you should be speaking to, not because you know them or they go to the same university as you or they're friends with someone that you're friends with. All of those processes which can create implicit biases, but instead because they're doing some work that's relevant to the work that you're doing. And they did that with an algorithm that matches the topics, the words that they're using to describe their work with the words that you use to describe theirs. And this basically, it also allows us to scale up this technology to a large scale as well. We can start to put large groups of people into these algorithms and start matching them up and do all sorts of things. For this Neuromatch conference, we decided to try and take that one step further and entirely get rid of the editorial bias. We wouldn't choose who got a talk. Everyone would get a talk. And the way we would handle that is that we knew we would have very many talks, in fact, around 900 talks. And that it would be impossible to manage that all on our own. So we decided to create algorithms for that as well. So first of all, we did a minimal review to reject a very small number, we thought. In fact, I think in the end, we rejected not a single abstract for a talk. So that was great. But we thought that we might get trolled with adverts or something. So we had a minimal review to check that. And then we had our scheduling algorithm. And the way this works is essentially, first of all, we try and group talks together into sessions of related talks. This was something that everyone at Neuromatch 1 and 2 asked for. They said, I was in a session with someone who was talking about something completely different from me, and everyone wanted to be in more thematically coherent sessions. So we started with that. And so before the conference, everyone, we asked everyone to vote on which talks, well, not really vote, but indicate which talks they'd be interested in seeing. So we had a huge matrix of all of the talks that all the different participants were interested in seeing. And we could use that so that, if everyone who was interested in talk A was also interested in talk B, we would try and put talk A and B into the same session together. We didn't quite have enough votes to only use that. So we also used the topic modeling technique that Conrad and Titipat developed in cases where there weren't so many votes. So that's how we designed the sessions. And I have the impression that worked pretty well. The sessions look pretty coherent. And then we went towards the scheduling. So all of our speakers and all of our participants indicated when they were available to give their talk or to watch the talks. And so we designed an algorithm that tries to slot all of the sessions in, subject to some sort of limit on how many simultaneous sessions there are, in such a way that there is as few conflicts as possible. So again, if talk A and talk B are a similar audience, so the people who want to watch talk A also want to watch talk B, but for whatever reason they're in a different session, we try not to schedule those two sessions at the same time so that we reduce conflicts, subject to all the constraints that we have to put everyone at times where they can actually give a talk. And yeah, so I thought that this would be something that would probably already exist, and we could just get some software that would do it for us. Turned out not, and it was actually kind of a complicated problem. But yeah, we managed to just about get that working in time, and that's produced the schedule that you'll see. And we're going to release all of the software for this basically as soon as we get a minute to actually do it. Okay. Yeah, was there anything else I should be saying about that? I don't think so. I think, yeah, well, oh yes. So at the last minute, we noticed that next weekend is Halloween. And so why not have a Halloween costume competition? So if your talk is scheduled on the Friday in any time zone, and you want to take part in the competition, just get your scariest or silliest costume you can, and we'll announce the winners. We'll set up some voting and we'll announce the winners for that on the closing session on Friday. So yes, please do that. I would love if on Friday every single talk had some sort of amazing costume. And I'll try and encourage all of the other Neuromatch organizers to dress up in costume for the closing session too, but we'll see how that works. Oh, they're all looking surprised. I didn't say that to them beforehand. Okay. All right, I think we're done with that. And I think Conrad is going to take us quickly through the webpage to how to navigate the conference a little bit.
Yes, great. You briefly need to stop sharing your screen because I can't share mine until then. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. And now I have to turn on my sharing. And now I'm sharing my screen. Fantastic. I made a new test user. So because this is so big, we all will rely on software to navigate that. Now, like in the old times of SFN, where you have like these like multi-page like search options where you can search by all kinds of things are long gone and like they don't work all that well. So we basically have glue behind all of Neuromatch to make navigating things easier. So let's look how this looks like. I just produced a new test user. You see someone called Brain who's working at brain.brain. And now let's see. So far, this is a blank slate. Like I just made that account. Neuromatch will be able to brag about having one more participant than they really have, and we should really correct that in all future iterations. But let's look at what we have here. We have a job board here. Actually, everyone should look at the job board. If you have a job or if you need a job, look at that. If you have a job, there's a job poster form. You put your name in and so forth, and you can all kinds of information describe the job. And similarly, if you look for a job, you can do that, and we will be looking into how to properly match those. And we also have a job board, a more traditional one, where you find the various jobs that have been posted. Please use it. We will try and make the data as valuable as possible. We're also talking with Worldwide Neuro to collaborate, and Tim Vogels is running that, but collaborating with them to make it even more useful. But in any case, there's a job menu that you should use, but the important thing right now during Neuromatch conference is the agenda. So there's two ways how you can do it. The first one is you can just click on the agenda, which gives you all the information that exists there. It's beautiful. You can choose any one of them, and you can add it to your Google Calendar by clicking here. You can also share it with your friends by clicking here, and you can join it by clicking on Zoom. And right now, I can, let's see, it's Monday. I can highly recommend that session. In fact, like there's no alternatives for you anyways. This is where we are. And you get here by effectively clicking that Zoom link there. This is one way of getting it. But like, look, this is kind of more information than I realistically want to digest. Not like it's beautiful, like it gives me all the information, but it's kind of too much. So there's the other way of doing that, which is going through the abstract browser. Now let's say I might be interested in eye movement research. Not like, what would I put in? I would put in eye. Let's see what we get on eyes. Okay, it now lists all things that the search algorithm, it's a regular standard search algorithm that the guys have been using. And eye movements in the formerly blind, that's interesting. Oh, I don't like this neural stuff. No, like, I'm not projecting Conrad, I'm projecting like what I would do if I was interested in eye movements, but not so much in the brain. Preparatory eye movements reveal prior knowledge. That sounds super cool. The effect of wearing eye mask on cognitive function and sleep. Yeah, that sounds interesting. Masks is something I can relate to. Let's see what this is actually about. Oh, look, in this study, we aim to explore whether wearing an eye mask while sleeping. Well, that's not actually about eyes. So let's remove that. Let's see what else we have. Dynamic analysis of eye head movement. Yeah, that is relevant to my interests. Visual motor transformation. Yeah, that's like, it's relevant. It's neuroscience, but it's really relevant to eye movements. And now what we can do is, now that we chose some, we can click on recommendations. The engine will basically recommend abstracts that are similar to us. Like, let's see here, lots of future gaze commands in monkeys. That's like totally relevant to that eye movement interest. Gaze behavior here, that population coding, not so much, but you get the gist here. I can then see my votes. Oh, I made a mistake here, maybe. And then once I've done that, I can click on my personalized schedule. And here you see like this opening session. Here we have a bunch of keynotes, and then we have talks. Now, I want to warn you about one thing, which is really confusing. It will always show you all the keynotes. Why does it show you all the keynotes? It turns out that we didn't realize that to use the algorithm, we needed full abstracts for all keynotes. And therefore, keynotes will always display, because if we don't have the abstracts of all the keynotes, we couldn't make sure that everyone sees the right keynotes. We will be running that differently next time. But for the moment, don't get confused here. Now, like at 10 a.m., you have the choice between 4 different keynotes. And we will display all of them in here. And same at 11, there's 3 different keynotes. But then afterwards, you see those are personalized recommendation. Supplementary motor area, how aesthetics preferences change over time. I assume there's some eye movements going on here. Hand specificity. And why does it recommend that? Well, because I said that I like eye-hand coordination. So there's text similarity about that. Now that panel, it's super cool, but again, why is it recommended? There's just one panel at that point of time. And we don't have abstracts for panels. But like at times where we have interactive or traditional talks, it will only show one at a time. So it makes really a personalized schedule for you. And it makes sure that all the things that you have started will always show up here. So it's really a personalized schedule just for you. And as you follow this along during the time, you can click on Zoom. Oh, hold on. No, I don't want to start like another meeting that doesn't exist yet. So just once it's the time to get started on that. Good, that's basically the backend. Is there something that I should have explained about it? Oh yeah, you should feel free to ask questions in the Q&A menu as well. If you have any questions about the webpage, feel free to use the chat as well. But I think you've seen what you needed to see about the page. Or does anyone have something to add here? Okay, if there's nothing to add and there's no questions at the moment, let me stop sharing my screen. And we are back here. And there's no questions in the chat. And we will also always try to end our sessions 15 minutes before the hour. And let me highlight why this is so important and why no one can run over in the length of their talks. We have only a certain number of Zoom instances. These Zoom instances are used pretty much every hour. If you start a new Zoom webinar while another one is still running on the same account, It kicks out the previous one. It's like we have 7 rooms that happen all in parallel, but as soon as the first person of the next meeting goes in, everyone gets kicked out without any warnings. What that means is that, and we told speakers to be there 10 minutes ahead of time, which means that absolutely everything must be finished by 50 minutes of the hour. So what that means is that your host will make sure that a 15-minute talk doesn't run over 15 minutes. In fact, they will tell you after 10 minutes that you're getting towards the end of time. It means that if we have a if you have a keynote, they will talk for 30 minutes, not long, and then we have 15 minutes for discussion. Why do I also like that? In reality, we're all at home, no? Or the vast majority of us are at home. It's really great to have 15 minutes to make coffee. I personally have a problem with coffee, and we need to tell the kids to log into for the next class. In fact, I will do that as soon as I'm finished with the sessioning here. And we need to do all those things. And therefore, I believe it's important that we all have 15 minutes break. So that means just like already, please, everyone be nice to our hosts who have the hard job of basically saying, guys, you've got to finish your talk on time. And in a way, it's a good thing, because if we're honest, those talks that like massively run over time, on average, they aren't even so good. So in any case, we will be very strong at policing basically the timing, because we have no choice, because 10 minutes of the hour, the room like literally ends. Okay, with that.
And Conrad, Patrick is telling us that we actually also have to stop now.
Yeah, which is fantastic. It's 44 minutes. In 1 minute, we will have to end this. What can I say? My name's Conrad Carding. I'm so excited to have all of you here. We as a team are super excited to have all of you. This is a fantastic organization. NMC is brought to you by a group of like really amazing people, and I'm so excited that we can bring this to you. Bye-bye.
Great week, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Enjoy NMC.
Enjoy.
Apologize for all my mangling of the names. And I think the Brain Initiative is just fantastically important for neuroscience. And I think it certainly has changed the way we do a lot of things. And I think it also promises to change the future. And in that sense, it's great to get the opportunity to talk about like funding streams in neuroscience and just to learn more about the Brain Initiative Alliance. And as we have a fixed timeline, why don't we immediately start with Michelle Elekonich?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Elekonich. I am the Deputy Division Director for the Division of Integrative Organismal Systems at NSF, the National Science Foundation. And we're the home of neuroscience at NSF. We are the location of long-running core programs in neural systems. And our Brain Alliance activities are ongoing. So we're continuing with the collaborative research in cognitive, in computational neuroscience and the neural and cognitive science efforts, and have recently made a new set of Neuronex awards, which are providing new connections and new tools to the community.
Well, fantastic, great. So let's see. We should next hear from David.
Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to contribute IARPA's perspective to this event. I'm David Markowitz. I'm a computational neuroscientist by training and a current program manager at IARPA, the Intelligence Advanced Research Project activity, which is the high-risk, high-reward research arm of the United States intelligence community. Many of you have probably heard of our older sibling, DARPA, which develops technologies to support the needs of national defense. IARPA applies the same actively managed applied research model, but focused on the needs of the intelligence community. And when I say applied research, that means we apply scientific insights to develop tools that can help us address real-world problems. That differentiates us from the basic science and biomedically oriented funding bodies in the US government. I'll provide some brief background about IARPA's neuroscience work, just so you know where we're coming from. And then I'll suggest a few areas where I see opportunities for future investments in both the public and the private sector, which I think was some of the guidance that we got for this workshop. Historically, IARPA's neuroscience portfolio has been driven by a desire to help intelligence analysts do their jobs better. Prior to the BRAIN initiative, most of the portfolio at IARPA in neuroscience was focused on cognitive neuroscience. Since 2014, however, IARPA has directly supported the BRAIN initiative through the Microns program, or the Machine Intelligence from Cortical Networks program, which I'm fortunate to run. Microns is focused on generating large-scale structure function data sets for encompassing complete cortical circuits, so we can map the physiology and the synaptic connectivity of circuits in awake animals, so that we can use insights derived from the analysis of those data to guide the development of improved machine learning algorithms and hopefully in the future, better computing architectures. Microns has contributed a lot of innovation on the experimental side, but what I'm really excited about for the future of the field, where I see a lot of opportunity going forward, is using data-driven models to support the analysis of these really rich data sets that are coming out of programs like Microns and like the ones being supported by our partner agencies. This is a good segue to talking about the changing landscape of opportunities in neuroscience. And while I can't talk about IARPA's future funding priorities in particular, I do want to emphasize that I think the bedrock of the BRAIN initiative, and frankly, the future of neuroscience, is multidisciplinary collaboration. Whether you're developing new tools or acquiring and analyzing data at scale or applying new tools and insights to industry problems, you're going to need broad scientific and engineering expertise. The BRAIN initiative has already funded several large multidisciplinary consortia. There are several new academic neuroscience institutes that draw faculty from a broad range of disciplines. And there's a nascent crop of neuroscience startup companies that are recruiting physiologists, engineers, data scientists. So I think that neuroscientists who learn to speak the language of other disciplines will be poised to reap the benefits of future collaborative opportunities in the field. Last, I definitely see an increasing appetite for neuroscience among private sector funders. This includes philanthropists, but also the venture capital community. One of my roles at IARPA is to help cultivate industries around problems that matter to our government partners. And so I do a lot of outreach to entrepreneurs and funders in the private sector. The BRAIN initiative has clearly catalyzed a lot of interest by people outside of academia about how we can build new platforms for studying diseases of the nervous system, how we can build new devices for interfacing with the nervous system, and how we can develop new algorithms and computing technologies using neuroscience as a guide. Just recently, there were several large exits just in the neural interfacing space, a couple $100 million each minimum, from fairly young companies, 4 or 5 years old. And that was just in the neural interfacing space. So I definitely see increasing opportunities for entrepreneurially minded neuroscientists to build new companies and to get the funding that they need to execute on an ambitious vision. There are a lot of approaches in neuroscience that I particularly am excited about for the future, but I think that's enough of an introduction. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks, David, for the great introduction. We should continue with Caroline then.
Yes, thank you very much, Conrad. So my name is Caroline Montojo, and I am the Director of Life Sciences and Brain Initiatives at the Kavli Foundation. The Kavli Foundation represents the private side of what's called the public-private partnership of the US Brain Initiative. Just to provide some context for our science audience out there, private foundations like the Kavli Foundation, Simons Foundation, and others can complement federal efforts from NSF, IARPA, NIH, and others to advance the BRAIN initiative because foundations like ours have some different approaches to supporting science. For those who are not familiar with the Kavli Foundation, our mission is to advance science for the benefit of humanity. We primarily do this through 2 programs. One of them is the Kavli Institutes, of which we have 20 of them around the world in our 4 fields that we support. This is neuroscience, nanoscience, astrophysics, and theoretical physics. And we also have a meetings and convenings program. And one of the things that we really look for in our meetings and convenings program is thinking about opportunities at the intersections between fields. And so related to David's earlier remarks, we are very interested in thinking about other approaches that come from other fields and how we can bring different fields together, different sectors together to advance science and advance neuroscience. One of the approaches that private funders often use is the ability to act in a really catalytic and flexible way on needs that are coming from the scientific community. So at the Kavli Foundation, a major part of my job is to speak directly with scientists and learn about what kinds of gaps there are in the field, what kinds of opportunities there are to support these gaps in a unique and early stage way. And this is often at a time when some federal funding agencies may be not yet able to dive in to provide investments in this space. So acting at that early stage is really important. One example of our approach to supporting the BRAIN Initiative and partnering with others, including the private and public partners of the BRAIN Initiative, is in our effort with Neurodata Without Borders, also called NWB. The foundation early on in the BRAIN Initiative started hearing from many scientists in the community about the importance of establishing a robust data standard for neurophysiology data. And so in this approach of catalyzing at an early stage and partnering, we partnered with the Allen Institute, INCF, the International Neuroinformatics Coordinating Facility, and many scientists who were leaders in this area, as well as data scientists, bringing together different disciplines, and provided funding for a pilot NWB data standard. And this was before other agencies had a mechanism for funding these standards from BRAIN Initiative projects. And so the NWB data format has been increasingly adopted by the science community. So with that, for this panel, we were asked to share, as David had mentioned and Conrad had mentioned, as well as Michelle, some of our ideas, our thoughts for areas of opportunities in neuroscience and neurotechnology, or where do we see the field moving? So from our work at Kavli, I'd like to share 3 areas where I see a lot of movement, and this is informed by conversations we've been having with many of you, those from the scientific community. One of those areas is in increasing opportunities for collaboration and coordination of neuroscience efforts globally, including those catalyzed by something called the International BRAIN Initiative. So this is an alliance of the large-scale, nationally or regionally sponsored BRAIN initiatives around the world. And what we've heard from the science community is that there's an opportunity for better coordination and collaboration among these large investments in neuroscience. So I see a lot of opportunity developing there. I think that there's a lot of opportunity in the space of neurotechnology dissemination. This is a very difficult problem. There are many different tools coming out of neuroscience right now, and there are many stakeholders that are part of this pipeline for technology development and dissemination. I think there are gaps and opportunities to fill here. I think they're very much multi-stakeholder and involve stakeholders coming from the venture cap, industry, philanthropic space. And so fitting those puzzle pieces together to help to have an effective pipeline is the key goal there. And then one other area where I think there's a lot of opportunity for development is actually in the area of neuroethics. Thinking about this not from the compliance and regulation standpoint, which I think many in the bioethics community have seen those types of approaches, but really in the opportunity to develop closer relationships and dialogues between neuroscientists, ethicists, social scientists, public engagement experts, to understand how best to talk about all of these developments that are coming from the neuroscience and neurotechnology community. This can be very empowering for scientists, and we've been seeing many examples of a productive dialogue coming from scientists who are really at the forefront of scientific discovery, even within the BRAIN Initiative. So those are some areas that I just wanted to share about as well. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Caroline. I think we should next hear from John about the BRAIN Initiative.
Hi, thank you. Really delighted to be here. John Nye, Director of the NIH Brain Initiative. The comments from the previous panelists really resonate with all that we are focused on in our mission. The Brain Initiative was started in 2014. We're now in our second phase. And I think it's fair to say that if we look back in the last 5, even 10 years, the rate and depth of tool development that have enabled really transformative discoveries has been simply breathtaking. And I think a lot of that success has been due to the engagement and leveraging of technology and expertise outside of the neuroscience or the biological sciences fields proper. There have been participation and really great interest from scientists from the physical sciences, chemistry and physics, as well as from the engineering sciences, and including at the interfaces in material science, and now really pushing very heavily into computer science and data science. And it's not just these sciences in service of neuroscience, but I think we're already starting to see the potential of a bidirectional flow of information and ideas and discoveries and new inventions. So this is, to me, extremely exciting. Based on the progress over the last 5+ years of the Brain Initiatives, I should say, NIH Brain Initiative, with the guidance and suggestion of this so-called Brain Working Group 2.0. This was a working group commissioned by NIH Director Francis Collins to take a second look at our strategic plan that was written in 2014 in the Brain 2025 report. And so this latest report made a very great suggestion that we look back on what we've accomplished so far and look forward to the future to ask, are there a certain number of large projects we could promote and prosecute that would truly transform the way that we not only conduct neuroscience basic research and fundamental discovery, but also as a path toward translating these discoveries into cures for human brain disorders, and and I should put in a plug as well for developing new computer architectures, I think, down the line. And so to this end, we have decided to move ahead on 3 large projects. One will be an extension of the Brain Initiative Cell Census project, which is to catalog and characterize all the major cell types in the mammalian brain. In the so-called phase 3 of the project, we will be pushing into developing a comprehensive human brain cell census. The second major project dovetails with that in developing tools for describing the complete wiring diagram of mammalian brains, the so-called brain connectivity or connectomics project. This is a very exciting project. It frankly does not quite have the technologies ready to really scale up, and the challenge will be to lay that out as a goal and see what inventions will be developed in service of that goal. And the third will take advantage of these 2 projects and actually enable them by building cell type specific tools for gaining access into postnatal animals. So this is the so-called cell type specific armamentarium project, which will really give us new tools for accessing and modulating these cells and circuits that are identified in these first 2 projects, but ultimately as a blue sky project to gain access into cell types in humans for human therapeutics. These are very large projects. They're quite ambitious. Some are more aspirational than others. What's clear to me is that we cannot do this alone. We will require the expertise, the know-how, and the commitments from other of our partner federal agencies, as well as from our private partners. So I'm looking forward to, in the next 5 years in the Brain Initiative, to really leveraging and building these public-private partnerships across the board as we face the challenges not only of developing technologies to get these projects done, but really the huge challenge will be how to disseminate and democratize these resources and technologies, both in terms of tools, reagents, know-how, but also very importantly, data. So I look forward to our discussion today in this realm. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much for the great overview. And it's always heartwarming for me to hear like real applications to make human lives better. So Alyssa, why don't we hear the Simons Foundation view from you?
Sure. Thanks so much, everyone. My name is Alyssa Pacchini-Schaefer, and I'm a senior scientist and administrative director at the Simons Foundation. And the Simons Foundation's core mission is to advance research in mathematics and the basic sciences. I oversee the neuroscience collaborations, which includes the Simons collaboration on the global brain and the Simons collaboration on plasticity and the aging brain. The global brain funds collaborative projects in systems and computational neuroscience, and the Aging Brain Project is looking at cognitive aging outside the context of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. And for both of these programs, one of the questions that we were guided to answer was sort of what does the next couple years outlook look like for funding, and what is our future priorities going to look like? For both of the neuroscience collaborations at the Simons Foundation, it's going to be another few years before we have a larger investigator RFA for senior faculty, but there will likely be opportunities for junior researchers like postdocs or junior faculty sooner. And I will just hop in here with one of the questions I see in the Q&A, which is that with private foundation funding, people hear of people being funded, but they don't always see clear calls for proposals. And I think that, at least in terms of the Simons Foundation and the neuroscience at the Simons Foundation, the best way to do it is to hear it directly from us, which is to go to our website, sign up for our newsletters, check our funding opportunities website often. We do our best to reach out within our capabilities, but sometimes we don't always get the message out as clearly and as widely as we'd like to. So please check in often, and that is absolutely the best way to see where and when our funding opportunities are coming up. For future funding, as far as sort of the process, I think we are really looking at, just like IARPA and Kavli have been speaking about, a collaborative model. And I know the NIH Brain Initiative and the NSF Brain Initiative are thinking along these lines in many ways also. From the Simons Foundation perspective, I think large awards to a single lab are much less likely moving forward. And we are really valuing the expertise, bringing different expertise together to work on solving these fundamental problems in neuroscience. Scientifically, for the global brain, I think we are likely to focus on the interactions of many brain regions. Neural coding and dynamics in more than one region of the brain and how they interact, I think, is really where we are looking scientifically moving forward. And in the Aging Brain program, we are going to be focusing on cognitive aging at all levels and characterizing that down from things like gene expression in the brain, what that looks like as an animal ages, all the way through neurophysiology and behavior. Our neuroscience programs at the Simons Foundation are very much aligned with the Brain Initiative, NIH, NSF, IARPA, and the work that Kavli is doing. Our investigators are poised to leverage brain-developed technological advances, and we are definitely aligned in supporting data standards to support the field. I think we were strongly recruited by Kavli to get on board with that mission in the best way possible, and we are very happy to support those things now. And especially with the global brain, I think our goals and ideas have been facilitated with an overlap in leadership with the Brain Initiative. At least 10 of our investigators and executive committee members have been on some of the working groups that have created the foundational documents for the directions that the Brain Initiative are going. And so I think that makes us poised to just all continue working together. So I look forward to continue working closely with everyone on this call and other foundation colleagues and government colleagues in order to keep the Brain Initiative moving.
Great, thanks so much. So I wanted to briefly go back to Michelle. So we heard a lot about individual programs at the various components here. Michelle, any chance you would share some of what's going on at NSF, what people should know about?
Sure. So in addition to the ongoing programs that have been part of the Brain Initiative, picking up on the same themes that my colleagues have brought forward, we have some new opportunities for neuroscientists to move outside of biology and interact with other computational scientists. And one of those is a new solicitation for AI, artificial intelligence institutes, that has a call for biological AI institutes. which will have a lot of resonance for neuroscience. And that comes out of our Computing, Information Science, and Engineering Directorate. And so please take a look at that. We are really hopeful that we'll get some really exciting institutes that are very integrative out of that. And then we also have 2 calls for mid-scale infrastructure. And this is 2 different levels. The mid-scale one are things that are $6 to $20 million. They're planning grants to move into the bigger infrastructure projects that are $20 to $100 million. And these are very large infrastructure. So in physics, they use this to fund telescopes, but for neuroscientists and for biologists, this could go beyond that infrastructure to what you need to share community data sets, to network, and to gather, annotate, and enable access to those data sets. And it's really all only limited by the creativity of the community in terms of how they build those places and structures to bring people together and to share community tools. And we're hoping that a lot of the tools that all of us here have been investing in could come together in some of these larger infrastructure projects. And so that's a chance for the community to think broadly about what infrastructure looks like and to plan and execute a longer term vision to enable infrastructure for the next stages of the BRAIN initiative.
Great, thanks so much. I have a follow-up question by Kurt Thorman that relates to an individual project. So on the IARPA webpage, he points out there's no open solicitations related to neuroscience. How can people find out about upcoming opportunities?
Going to the open solicitations page is the absolute best way to find out about what's available currently. IARPA follows a different cadence for our funding than our larger peers, such as NIH and NSF, larger in the sense of more constitutively focused on neuroscience research. The thing to understand about the applied research agencies is that programs are driven by the program manager. Has to come to the organization on a fixed term, project vision, build the community around a problem, launch the solicitation, and see the program through. And so we are rate limited in our ability to pursue work in the neurosciences by the availability of qualified and interested scientists who want to come to IARPA. So if there is something in particular, I myself, I'm on a maximum 5-year appointment and I have a 1.5 years left, which isn't really enough. And I already run 4 or 5 programs. So in order to expand our neuroscience portfolio, come and contact us about working with us if you're interested and if you think something needs to exist, and you can make it happen. And I realize that's not as easy as saying, well, we're going to be funding X, Y, and Z over the next several years, but we're able to take bigger swings at problems, at higher risk problems in the applied research realm than other agencies are. So think about what you think we should be doing and tell us, and then we'll tell you to come help us do it.
Right, so I briefly wanted to follow up on a question that we have there, which is that, which I think a lot of people have, which is, you guys represent some of the best funding opportunities available to us neuroscientists. How do we generally find out about it? Like we just saw David's version. Any chance you guys can all just quickly chime in kind of on what's the best way for scientists like me to sort of get funded on cool research projects?
Sure, I can hop in from the Simons Foundation perspective, which is we do our best to reach out, and sometimes we aren't able or do a poor job at casting a wide enough net. And that's something we're actively working on. But the absolute best way is to come to our website, and look at our funding opportunities. Also remember that our timelines are very different than the NIH's. So our calls aren't going to go up a year in advance of when they're due. I'm sorry, NIH, I'm probably misrepresenting how long your calls are. But our calls are sort of on much shorter timelines. And the types of applications that we solicit are also aligned with that. So look at our website often, sign up for our newsletters and our announcements, and that is absolutely and actually read them. And that's absolutely the best way, because it's not always the headline, right? But the information is always in there. So that's absolutely the best way to get the information from the Simons Foundation.
And I'm happy to chime in from the perspective of the Kavli Foundation, Conrad. I recognize that the approaches of private foundations may sometimes be opaque, especially because we operate in such a different way than do other funders in science. And so from the perspective of the Kavli Foundation, we are somewhat untraditional in the sense that we typically do not give out grants. We're not a traditional grant-making foundation with requests for proposals and so on. Our two primary mechanisms for supporting science are the Kavli Institutes, wherein we encourage scientists within the institutes to use the funds, these catalytic funds that come from endowments that we provide with matching support from universities. And we encourage them to use it in the most catalytic, best use for science that they can envision. So that's one of our mechanisms for funding. And then the other mechanism, which is targeted toward the broader community, is that of our catalyzing program. So these are meetings, pilots, initiatives that the community feels are really important to help to spearhead in their early stages. And so for these types of initiatives and meetings, we do invite the feedback, suggestions, ideas coming from the broader community. We invite scientists to try and think big. And if we hear that this particular opportunity is something that is really resonant across many scientists in a field or across fields, for example, nano-neuro, also learning from other fields like astrophysics and beyond, then we try and support these efforts initially through meetings. But if there are pilot programs that can emerge out of them that are really promising, then we can follow up with those. One exception to this in terms of that RFP approach is that with the Neurodata Without Borders program, which we help to seed along with other partners and continue to partner with the Simons Foundation and others on, is that this one actually does offer seed grant opportunities. This is to help promote adoption of the data standard. And so there are opportunities that are available and posted on the nwb.org website. I think for the 2021 series of those will be posted at a later time. And so that's one opportunity that is an exception to the norm for the traditional Kavli Foundation approach.
Great, thanks so much. I would like to briefly switch to the questions that we had discussed before. So a lot of scientists are interested in the general trend here. So now, like, we have a lot of announcements that were out over the last couple of years, but clearly you guys have ideas of where the field is moving. You have ideas of how you think the funding climate's going to change and which things will become priorities that were and which things currently might be very popular that kind of like are maybe not so much among the most interesting things for you. So I was wondering if who would be able to share some thoughts about like this trend in the field.
You're putting us on the spot, Conrad.
I know, but like, no, like if when the Brain Initiative came, a lot of people said, well, finally someone prioritizes the development of technologies, and a lot of neuroscience is technology driven, no question. At the same time, it had a sudden flavor, and some people loved it and some people loved it less. But do you think this is kind of the direction that we're on, that we will keep going, or do you think that, say, we will pivot more clinical or more basic science or more engineering even? What's your flavors? What's your intuition there?
So I'm happy to, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's a great question. I think the fields are never static, and therefore the needs and the opportunities are also never static. As I mentioned, there's been just a breathtaking development of tools and discoveries over the last 5+ years from researchers not only within the biological sciences, but from outside. I think our vision for the NIH Brain Initiative is to, well, first of all, to continue developing these tools. I think we still need them, but also to start applying them in a more focused way toward biological problems. And there's a lot of effort in the NIH Brain Initiative portfolio that is focused on what I call circuit busting. But it's circuit busting using new approaches, and these new approaches involve new technical experimental tools, but also new ways of looking at circuits based on a theoretical grounding. So there's a growing portfolio in theory as it's applied to the understanding of how circuits drive behavior. So that's a very exciting development. Another area is to really push ourselves toward finding new ways of developing interventions for human brain disorders. Brain kind of is brain within NIH occupies an interesting space in that it was set up initially to be disease agnostic. It still is. We have 10 NIH institutes and centers participating in brain, each with their own disease mission focus. But brain does support quite a bit of work in first-in-human trials. And I think this is important because as we develop technologies for interventions in one disease, the hope, the aspiration is that they might be democratized across different disease modalities. So again, I think the opportunities are shifting because we're developing the ability to get into areas which we couldn't have gotten into before. And I've always contended that necessity is the mother of invention. We need people out there asking great questions to really give us the challenge to meet, and we will meet them with technologies. But bearing in mind that at least I'm a biologist, I'm still interested in biological questions. But it's the two go together. It's not either or. And I think what we saw in the first 5+ years of the Brain Initiative was an intensive focus on tool building because the tools we had, frankly, were lacking in allowing us to answer the questions with the level of detail and resolution that we really needed.
And at NSF, we're always balancing, right? The need for tools that move the science forward, because that's the mission, along with the basic research. And so we have, ongoing programs in neuroscience, and those will continue to focus on larger questions and on computation and on how things are connected and how things work in the healthy brain, right? And we're going to continue to focus on training the next generation of scientists, which is the other part of our mission. And so you'll see that in all the neural systems core programs in iOS. You'll see that in the neural and cognitive systems call, right? That there is this balance between the calls for tools and the calls for really basic research to understand the healthy brain.
And I think one of the ways that the Simons Foundation can and does sort of augment and align with some of the things the NIH and the NSF are doing is we are really a basic science research organization. And we are also not focused on tools, and the investigators that we fund, we think deeply about how they might be able to leverage some of the tools and use those cutting edge technologies that have been developed by the NIH and the NSF, and even some of the work IARPA is doing. And we partner with Kavli in order to support a lot of these things. So we are, that sort of is our focus moving forward.
And I'm also happy to share and David as well. Yes, thanks, David. Yes, from the Kavli Foundation perspective, one of the areas that we've been seeing a lot of movement among our Kavli institutes in terms of trends is something that John, as well as Michelle, had brought up earlier, which is thinking about the side of the neuroscience spectrum of approaches coming from computation, mathematical neuroscience and theory. Our Kavli Institutes in some ways are our temperature gauge for where things are going within the scientific community. And we've already seen many moves within our own Kavli Institutes to incorporate more of that community within each of the institutes. And so this is an area that's really exciting. I was also excited to hear about this NSF Institute on AI and the biological systems. But this is an area that we're also watching closely to see where this goes, not only within our institutes, but also if there are opportunities to bring different communities together. I was recently, well, I guess not recently, about a year or so ago at a symposium on AI and neuroscience. What are the connections between AI researchers and neuroscientists? How do they view each other? It's really interesting to watch the sociology of these different groups coming together. And that's one of the things that we also focused on, is thinking about how do you move the needle and changing the sociology of neuroscience. And so it'll be really interesting, I think, to think about opportunities in this space. And we always look for ideas on how to help that needle to move.
I think just because a lot of people have spoken since Conrad asked this question, my recollection of the question was, how do we see funding priorities changing over time, right? And if I can just offer my own opinion from inside the government, I've seen a very large focus over the first phases of the BRAIN initiative on tool development, and now on acquiring hero scale data sets, right? On the Microns program, we've acquired petabytes of neural circuit maps. And it will take the work of 100 labs a decade to really mine all of the insights that there are in just this one data set. So I think of necessity, we're likely to see priorities in neuroscience transition from description to seeking understanding, as has been highlighted by multiple other speakers, because it just doesn't seem like a good use of the taxpayers' money to keep acquiring hero data set after hero data set if we are not demonstrating that we can extract the value from it. That was the motivation for acquiring them in the first place. And so we're investing heavily in our ongoing programs at IARPA on tools for analysis and proofreading and trying to gain insight from these massive data sets. And then data sharing, which might be a good segue into another part of this discussion.
Yes, exactly. So we have an interesting question, which is, to which level methods and approaches to data sharing are central to your missions, that a lot of our audience will be interested in?
I mean, I can talk about that first. On Microns, like I just mentioned, we have acquired probably the largest data set in neuroscience history, now featured prominently on the Brain Initiative Alliance website. So thank you for that. And I mean, we're funding 3 main institutions to work with these data, and that's not going to be enough, frankly. So our teams have already taken the initiative on making the first generation of their data publicly available. You can go to microns-explorer.org right now, and you can load up a connectome in your web browser, a cortical connectome. And there are several initiatives that are already in the works for sharing larger portions of the data set, covering complete cortical circuits and the interactions between regions. So it's a priority for IARPA to make the data available as a force multiplier for our mission, so that we can get as many groups working with it as possible. I'm happy to hear others' perspectives on that.
I think as we think about funding collaborations of scientists moving forward, like David, we are taking a huge leap funding. It's both an experiment scientifically and an experiment in the sociology of science, funding the International Brain Laboratory. And core to that is sharing data. Now that's within one collaboration, but we're of the opinion that in order for neuroscience to really move forward, we need much broader scale data sharing. And I think that's absolutely core to the future of neuroscience as we see it.
Chiming in from the Kavli Foundation perspective, the question was how core is data sharing, or how central is data sharing within our mission? This is an area that we've been focusing on very deeply, again, because early on, when the BRAIN Initiative was was getting off the ground, we were hearing from many within the community about the need for data standards, which can help to enable sharing to take place. And so the Neurodata Without Borders program is one example of this. And at the R Foundation, Stephanie Albin has been really doing a fantastic job in helping to lead this program, importantly in partnership with scientists from the community, coming from universities, not only within the US, but also getting perspectives internationally as well. And so it is central for us because we see this as a critical enabler for the impacts of neuroscience data collection to really be realized.
Thanks so much for this discussion. I want to add one question that we should briefly go over before we'll have to wrap up in 3 minutes, which is the technology dissemination aspect. Now, like we generate all these technologies, we generate all those data sets. How are they going to like become products that ultimately make its way out and make the world a better place?
Right. If I can just chime in quickly also to finish off the last conversation. I mean, the data dissemination and other resource and tools dissemination is critical, and it will be critical for any success of the BRAIN initiative. The NIH BRAIN initiative has set up a series of data resource sharing groups, and we're trying to build an ecosystem not only within our own projects, but also with an outward-facing view so that the entire scientific community can have access to use and reuse these data. So that's very important. We cannot do this alone. We will definitely be looking to our partners here to help get these resources out there and to really coordinate the efforts across the globe. Similar things can be said about dissemination of actual tools and resources. And again, I think the important thing here is to build a strong ecosystem. And I think we've already seen some remarkable successes, as Elisa mentioned, in developing a sociology, right? A kind of a way for people to work collaboratively. Collaborative science, I think, is really the key to our success. It's quite frankly not the way many scientists approach what they do. We're rugged individualists, but I think people are already seeing the benefits of working collaboratively, and hopefully we can promote and cultivate that ethos into what we do. I think this really will help make the sum just much greater than the parts put together.
Yes, we've been very much in that space as well, focusing on not only funding the research but building communities. And we do that by gathering them together at PI meetings and at conferences. In fact, the NeuroNext community, all the researchers that were funded by our NeuroNext part of the BRAIN initiative, will be gathering virtually later this week for a 2-day PI meeting.
Very, very nice. Great. So if there's no more, we have 2 questions, but I don't think we have time to talk about it. So I think I'd just like to wrap this up. What did we learn today? We learned that, like, yes, it's necessary to continuously trawl the web pages of all the agencies that are here. I wish that in the future we could have a Neuromatch-like matching mechanism that tells the right people the right things that they should know. The BRAIN initiative is on a certain movement, and in a way we will see more of that movement in like a broadening, if anything, if I understood the answers right. And ultimately, yes, all the involved agencies are strongly working towards dissemination and making things useful. And I personally want to thank all of our participants here for the great insights they gave us about the funding structure. And let me clap in lieu of everyone else who you can't hear, but they're just as well outside. And I want to thank you for being here and discussing these questions with us. And of course, for supporting the Neuromatch movement. So thanks so much. And everyone,